So welcome everybody to our latest webinar, Mind the Gap, supporting neurodivergent talent from attraction to onboarding. My name is Matt Reed, I'm Head of Corporate here at Medigold, and I'm going to be your host for today. Just before we introduce the panellists, who are by far the most important people on today's call, just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So for those of you who haven't attended one of our webinars before, just to let you know that the session is being recorded. All of our sessions that we offer externally are recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. And obviously, once that's uploaded, we'll let you know. We'll send you the link in the next day or so once that's done. And feel free, and we'd welcome you sharing that with any other team members or colleagues or friends. Now, as you'd expect, we've got well over 100, about 150 people so far on the webinar. So enable it to be a good experience. You're not going to be visible during the webinar, and neither are your microphones turned up. So feel free to sit and have a coffee, sandwich, whatever you want to do, and we'll let the panelists and the experts take the strain for this one. Now, we do have time for a Q&A session in the last sort of 10 to 15 minutes. We'll see how we go. So as we go, feel free to add questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen during your webinar, and depending on time, we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. But as we go, we'd welcome you to use the chat function as well. It's great to get comments. The last couple of webinars have been particularly interactive, and it's great to see you passing your thoughts and comments and experience as we go along. And then finally, before we introduce the panelists, our webinars are a taster of our commercial products. Obviously, we don't charge anyone to enter them, but nor do we share the presentation slides, which is quite a common question we get through. So that's not something we do, but as we said, we will share with you the recording from today. Once that's uploaded onto our YouTube channel, you can feel free to download and view that, or as we said, to share that with any colleagues. Okay, so let's get started. So first and most important point is to introduce our expert panel for today. I'll let them introduce themselves. We've got Kath and Helen, my two colleagues, and then we're delighted to be joined by Nicola from Ipswich Borough Council as our guest panelist today. So first of all, Kath, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, we're at lunchtime. I'm Kath Wood, and I lead in the disability training consultancy team on products and consultancy, and I've been working in the field of neurodiversity and employment for probably 8 to 10 years now, and I'm the author of the neurodiversity toolkit that's Medigold have on offer. Helen?
Yeah, so I'm Helen. I am the neurodiverse team lead for Medigold. So I oversee sort of all the neurodiverse services that we offer in terms of workplace adjustments. So that's assessments and coaching and the like. My background is predominantly sort of surrounded by neurodiverse conditions, also a qualified psychologist as well. So a lot of interest in sort of human behaviour and how that interacts with the workplace. So that's me.
Thanks, Helen. Last but by no means least, Nicola.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, I'm Nick Davison, Learning Development Manager here at Ipswich Borough Council. I've been in L&D roles, gosh, probably, I hate to say it, but 25 years, I think now. And I've been with the council 3 years. So looking forward to just sharing our journey with you a bit later on in the session.
Lovely. Thanks very much. So just to remind you, feel free as we go to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we'd certainly welcome your thoughts and comments and sharing your own experiences through the chat as we go. So without further ado, Kath, I'll hand across to you and we can get started.
Perfect. So just it's my sort of job to start us off by looking at what we're going to cover. So really today's focus is really looking at the benefits that neurodivergent individuals can bring to your organisation, thinking about how their fresh thinking, different approaches, focus, all of that stuff can contribute to the success of your business. We're then going to look at your recruitment and attraction, looking at how we can be inclusive and open up that talent pool. We're going to look at sort of job adverts, interview adjustments, a whole range of different examples that you can use to implement in your business. And then we're going to look a little bit around topics of how to kind of do really successful and excellent onboarding to make sure that people feel comfortable and can hit the ground running from day one. And then, as I say, we're delighted to be joined by Nicola, who's going to talk about Ipswich Borough Council's work in the field of neurodiversity. And I've been lucky enough to work alongside her on a really interesting project. And I'm delighted that she's able to come and talk about it from that perspective. So let's kind of start the topic by looking at what neurodiversity is. This is one of my favourite quotes. So neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many different ways. There is no one right way of thinking, learning and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. So this quote really explains it well. Neurodiversity is a term really that describes the different ways that people think, the different ways that brains develop and function. And we're going to focus today on how those different ways of thinking can benefit organisations and how you can get more of that different thinking into your business. We're going to look at how we can remove barriers which are preventing people from showcasing their skills and strengths, not only in the recruitment process, but also thinking about once in post as well. So before we move on, let's look at the prevalence of neurodiversity. So remembering we're looking at estimates, and these are for diagnosed conditions. So in fact, the figures could be higher. So if we look at a collection of those figures and we consider kind of pooling them together into one pool of neurodivergent conditions, we're estimating that somewhere between 10 and 15% of the population are likely to have a diagnosis of a neurodiverse condition. But that's not where the story ends, because there are lots of people out there who display different traits of neurodivergence, maybe have missed the opportunity in education to go for a diagnosis, don't feel they need one, have managed, to develop their own coping strategies, or are one of the many people who are on a waiting list for a diagnosis. So if we consider that pool as well, we're looking at the prevalence within society and within potentially the working population of figures somewhere rising to 20 or even 25% in some estimates. So realistically, no business can really afford to dismiss or ignore anything which can impact between a fifth and a quarter of a workforce, and certainly between a fifth and a quarter of a potential recruitment pool. So I really want to focus now on the skills and strengths that neurodiversity can bring to a business. On these next two slides, you'll see a selection of famous and successful people who are either neurodivergent, who are thought to be neurodivergent because some were around before diagnoses existed. So on this slide, you can see a wide range of successful people from the creative arts, from music, acting, directing, writing, photography and art, and a chef. In these industries, having a vivid imagination, a creative mind is really helpful, and ADHD and dyslexia in particular are associated with great communication, the ability to collaborate, being able to interest and inspire others, certainly part of stage presence. On the second slide, we can see that this quality could also be linked to leadership and success of the politicians and entrepreneurs that are on this slide. We can also see a range of inventors, scientists, where problem solving, seeing a different solution is really the key to their success. And marketing a new solution and taking a calculated risk are also important in the success of businessmen and entrepreneurs that you might see on this slide as well. And finally, not to be forgotten, there are some sporting heroes. Here the link is slightly harder to see, but if you've spent your life trying to overcome challenges due to being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, you tend to have developed resilience and persistence, which is really important in sport. There are other qualities linked to neurodivergence that can help you to be successful in sport. Michael Phelps links his swimming success to his ability to hyper-focus on his training. And Lucy Bronze says her special interest in football linked to her autism and her hyper-focus and ADHD on her training have directly led to her success in women's football. So what this clearly shows is that being neurodivergent isn't a barrier to success. And some people might say, "Well, isn't it great that these people have been successful despite or overcoming being neurodivergent?" But that's a really negative way of looking at their success. I think we should challenge that, because actually we can see that some of the skills and strengths of being neurodivergent could be a big contributor to the reason why somebody has been successful. So why would we want to attract and recruit neurodiverse talent into our business? What skills and strengths are we looking for that could be higher in this pool of talent? So neurodiversity literally means diversity of the brain. So we know that people who are neurodivergent think differently. Some of these can be different ways of thinking, can be a distinct advantage to us in the workplace. And that's why many companies out there are looking for recruit neurodiverse employees. So neurodiversity is linked with creativity and innovation, as we've heard. Many people are naturally curious and inquisitive. They can often take an alternative approach to an issue and not be afraid to challenge the norms and to challenge our way of thinking. Some people are able to visualize how things look, thinking visually or in 3D, which helps people to absorb information from lots of different sources and put it all together into a single concept much quicker. It's also quite an advantage in the areas of design. Many neurodivergent people have high levels of focus and specifically great attention to detail. This is a real strength in the ability to find faults, to troubleshoot, to see patterns in information and make connections, to literally see things that other people wouldn't be able to see. But there's also an element of neurodivergence that helps people to see different perspectives, a bigger picture, really helping them to have enhanced strategic, lateral and critical thinking. All of it sounds good so far, doesn't it? If you put these abilities and layer them on top of each other, one of the big strengths is problem solving. And who doesn't need a problem solver in today's workplace? The neurodiverse brain is set up for being analytical and logical. In many cases, people are able to work consistently and systematically, to be precise, thorough, and methodical. Really, really helpful in a lot of specific jobs, but also in certain key elements, really important key elements of jobs. Despite and often because of the challenges that neurodivergent people have faced through education, through life in general, they're likely to develop some really strong personality characteristics, which we value at work as well too. Things like reliability, conscientiousness, determination, persistence. And for some people, these difficulties have given them an empathy and understanding for others, and have certainly enhanced their ability to collaborate, to work together, and to communicate with others. So now we know a little bit more about the specific strengths and skills that can be helpful. Let's think about why else should we think about attracting neurodiverse talent and how else it can benefit our business. So not only do you have access to the neurodiverse talent pool, if you become known as an inclusive and supportive employer, you'll be able to attract talented applicants who are looking for that in an employer. And certainly some people are looking for employers that bring social value and do something different to support the well-being of their workforce. We know that particularly Gen Z and graduates are looking at businesses and prioritising businesses who are looking after employee well-being. So if you want to attract the best talent from the neurodiverse talent pool, but also from recent graduates, it's something to take really seriously. It can also show those from other diverse backgrounds that you are supportive and inclusive, and this really does open up your talent pool. For example, if we look at the 2021 census, we know there's been an increase in diverse households, and in England and Wales, over a quarter of households include one disabled person. Having a diverse workforce actually looks and helps your business to be more representative of the community that you serve, your customer group. And this can help you to secure and engage with and retain more customers. It can enhance your overall reputation, make your brand stand out in a busy marketplace. Often you'll have ESG or corporate social responsibility goals or public sector duty. So the work you do on attracting neurodiverse applicants will also help towards meeting those requirements. Diversity in your workforce can have a real positive impact on everyone, on staff engagement and development opportunities. So providing opportunities for colleagues to learn and develop new skills. People can get involved in coaching and mentoring employees, and managers will learn and develop knowledge that can really help them to support all of their team and the whole workforce, not just those who are neurodivergent. You'll also be able to gain better access to the Purple Pound, which is the spending power of disabled people and their households. So this continues to increase, and the 2020 figures, which are the most recent, it's thought to be worth £274 billion a year to UK businesses. And within the data that's been produced with that, there's a couple of other stats I just want to draw your attention to. So businesses lose approximately £2 billion a month by ignoring the needs of disabled people, and 75% of disabled people and their families have walked away from a UK business because of poor accessibility or poor customer service. So significant figures to bear in mind as well. And finally, Just to add to the business case, I want to talk you through some examples of businesses who have started to recognise the competitive advantage of neurodiverse talent. And they've created specific recruitment processes and programmes to attract and recruit more neurodivergent people to their businesses. So we've got multinational tech companies, finance organisations and consulting businesses, along with government departments who are actively recruiting neurodivergent people for the specific skill set and strengths that they bring to businesses. So I'm going to challenge you. It's time to now think how you could adapt your attraction and recruitment strategy to ensure that you're not missing out on neurodiverse talent and that you have access to this diverse talent pool. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague Helen, who's now going to talk you through some things to consider if you decide to make those changes.
Okay, thanks, Kath. So how do we go about attracting more neurodiverse applicants? Firstly, it's about where and how you advertise. Whilst using job search sites does give you wide access, it does not guarantee reaching a neurodiverse audience. Working with the job centre can increase your pool of talent, and it's worth finding out about local employment programmes that may be available to you as well. Employment programmes are in a period of change, again, as Kath mentioned, with the fluctuation of diagnosis and a bit more of an increase in people who are aware of neurodiverse conditions and the impact that they can have. There's a lot of change within these programmes, more funding and more sort of focus, should we say, is on these sort of programmes now. You can seek some more specialist sites and agencies over and above the usual kind of areas of job adverts. For example, things in the UK involve Even Break, Disability Job Site, Ability Links, RIDI, for example. They're UK sites that are specifically about neurodiverse talent, and they are called Neurodiversity Jobs, Diversity Exceptional Individuals, and ENA. These are all just examples. There are more, but they're really good areas of employment that people may not be familiar with, but there's a lot of scope and a lot of talent on those links there. People are often attracted to work for organisations based on what they know about them as well. So we want to attract these talented individuals. So what they can find out about you on your website, for example, can make a world of difference. You can influence them in a number of ways simply on your website alone. Your website needs to be accessible and needs to be able to be used with assistive technology. A lot of neurodiverse individuals will use some form of assistive technology to help them navigate their way through any kind of online engagement, any kind of forms, documentation, etc. So having that accessibility option is a real plus. Next, people will look for content, and that will be the content that suggests that you are an inclusive and supportive employer. This might be by viewing your mission and your values, looking out for diversity in your case studies that you might have in your website, or seeing if you have any accreditations, such as Disability Confident, etc. On your careers site as well, so it's not just your website. If you have a careers page, this is another time for you to shine. Your careers site would be looking for a statement or commitment to inclusivity and diversity. So any kind of wording that you have, examples that you have to show that you are an inclusive employer is always a win for seeking neurodiverse talent. There should also be a method of contacting someone, so people can actually ask for help. They can ask questions, they can ask what your adjustments may be, anything in the realm of accessibility, any values, just opens up that door of communication. Ideally on the careers homepage is where you should have that contact, because it will be more likely relevant to the career and the job advert that you are hosting, but it can be even on each individual advert as well, as long as you have a form of communication there. Then we come to the actual adverts themselves. The aim is to attract a diverse set of applicants, so every effort should be made to not put people off by the language that you use. We do know that, companies want to shine and they want to show their knowledge and their expertise, but sometimes for the layperson who may not be, you know, as informed in terms of abbreviations, for example, or specific wording that your company may use internally. It can put people off as they're not really sure what that means. So you should be clear and concise with what you write. Avoid those jargon words that you may use, any technical language, the abbreviations, the acronyms that may make sense to yourselves and colleagues already working in your business, but something that may not necessarily be known by the layperson as yet. Bullet points are great as well. Subheadings can also help break up text. So anything that can just make it much more easy to read, small chunks, and breaking things up are fantastic tools to use for neurodiverse individuals to still get access to that information. Your job descriptions, the duties you describe should only be essential. So everything in those descriptions should be, again, bullet points, subheaded, only essential information. Try to avoid any kind of waffle, as it were. Any kind of frequent or regular duties, mention particular tasks, anything that is over and above or something that you may only do twice a year. Try and minimize those and just stick to the general day-to-day tasks that person will be doing. If someone finds something too challenging, it could mean that they don't apply as well. So if it does sound like it is a lot, it can be very overwhelming for the individuals, and they can just skip past that job advert. When in reality, it could just be a simple process of rejigging those words around, reallocation within the team, for example, can make that job much more accessible to that individual. Also, within your job descriptions and person specifications, it's a good idea to specify essential and desirable skills. So the applicant, again, is not put off if they cannot show one particular skill. So again, make sure that, you do strongly differentiate between the essential and desirable task set. It also helps if you're offering guaranteed interviews for disabled applicants that meet the essential criteria. And this is, again, part of that disability confidence scheme. So if you've mentioned that on your website, it would be really good to then follow that through right the way through to your job description. It's also good practice to focus on the generic skill as well, rather than a particular method or piece of software or equipment that is required to do it. Again, an individual may not apply if they cannot use that specific method. Again, terminology comes into play here. There's certain methodologies that people may label slightly differently, which can put people off. Equipment or software, again, is another issue where some people like to use specific software, others not, or again, they might have very different versions of, name them different names, but it's the same thing. A lot of conflict in information, so keeping it nice and simple and generic shows that the individual can look through and say, yeah, I'm capable of completing that in my own way. So across the conditions and traits, there are some current areas of challenge which we need to consider when thinking about our adjustments to our recruitment process. So the common areas of challenge, again, is our concentration and focus, organisation and time management, processing and memory, reading and writing, communication and social interaction, confidence and self-esteem and emotional issues. So again, if you think back on those sort of your websites, those job adverts that you're drafting, if something is very long and very wordy, that concentration and focus, it may not be there to actually read the full job advert. Same with your website. If you've got a lot of things going on there, and that individual may not be able to stick around for long enough to get a good feel for your business. Again, the processing and memory, when things are short and snappy, neurodiverse individuals have a much better capacity to be able to process and memorize small, sort of snappy information. Again, that wordy and waffle can be a little bit difficult for them to process. Again, the reading and writing elements, just bear in mind that people may be using text-to-speech software, for example, if they sort of struggle with their reading and writing. So making sure that they are accessible and they can be used within those softwares. Other areas of challenge is mathematics, being impulsive, hyperactive, routine and structure change, movement and coordination, and sensory sensitivity. Again, all areas to consider when you are penning up your job description. So if you have a job, for example, that does require a higher level of structure, should we say, there's certain flow charts that you need to follow. It's just making sure that that is identified in your job description as well. So with this in mind, what are the potential challenges and barriers that we inadvertently put in our recruitment processes for neurodiverse people? Most organisations use an online application process, which may be difficult for a number of reasons. People may struggle to read lots of information, follow complex instructions, and quite often, as mentioned, they don't work with the assistive technology that these individuals may need. They also may be timed. Again, so thinking of that time, if they're limited and they need a little bit more time to process things, they may struggle if they see that sort of time running out, they'll panic and they may not complete that application. You may also find that imagining sort of what you do in certain scenarios is not easy for individuals, specifically on the autism spectrum. They have the difficulty with sort of interpreting and essentially putting themselves in someone else's shoes or putting themselves in a specific scenario. So if your online application involves a question along those lines, again, that can be something that can be challenging for neurodiverse individuals. Simple adjustments like adding extra time, offering a Word document equivalent, or the ability to send in a CV can remove these barriers straight away. You can even take an application verbally over the phone if that is applicable for your company and that works. So many businesses use some form of screening questions in the process. So after you've made the online application, we'll move on to the screening. As part of this process, again, we've got to consider if a neurodiverse individual has auditory processing skills, for example. And they are sort of something that they find very challenging. So then only listening to the questions themselves can actually be hard for that individual, let alone processing them and trying to give you that answer. Again, there may be a challenge if you use scenarios in these elements. Again, that processing of verbal information may take them a little while if they're able to get there at all for that. What you can do to help on the screening area is skip it altogether if it's an option. If you must follow the screening process, can you possibly provide questions in advance? Can you assess the candidate through written questions or allow someone to be in the call with them, for example? Another form of assessment is assessment days. However, assessment days can often be lengthy and challenging for neurodiverse individuals. So splitting it over 2 days could help. You may also want to consider to minimise the waiting time and the level of anxiety as employees or prospective employees, should I say, are waiting does increase their level of anxiety. If you are needing to put together an assessment day, allowing for extra breaks can be very helpful. Think about group activities. Group activities can actually be hard for neurodiverse individuals. So is there an option to possibly reduce the size of the groups? Again, offering that additional time for tasks or giving them that time to be able to process what it is that you want of them for them to be able to give you that answer and just level that playing field. There can be a lot of unknowns with assessment days and it can cause people a lot of anxiety. So if you can give a full agenda and lots of detail in advance, it'll just allow for that prep time and to reduce the stress and anxiety levels. Again, consider if they're using technology. Assessment days, if you're having any kind of resource or task that is paper-based, are they needing access to optical character recognition software that can read things to them and not just assuming that technology will not be used in a practical assessment day. It may well be necessary. It's also considering the not assessing of essential skills as well. So if you are putting on an assessment day that is not looking at the essential skills, is it really necessary, or can that actually be reviewed or removed, or could it be, you know, a smaller kind of panel or group, as it were. Formal interviews are the next potential sort of element and barrier to individuals. One issue is how behaviour may be interpreted when it comes to a formal interview. Oh, sorry, we've got a bit of a technical delay. There we go. I'm skipping ahead. So formal interviews there. So their behaviour is often interpreted in formal interviews. For example, a lack of eye contact might be seen a lack of interest. Fidgeting might be seen as excessive nervousness, not quite prepared. However, they're just general sort of traits that we may see on neurodiverse individuals. It can help greatly. It can help greatly if those interviewing can be made aware of any issues that people may have, so they can discount these in the decision making. So if you have an individual with autism, for example, who really struggles to maintain the eye contact, then that's not taken off any kind of points or marks, and that may be sort of otherwise sort of taken off if that wasn't information that was known. Some people may struggle to understand or follow complex questions. Again, going back to that complexity element of things. So again, goes back to language, you know, simple, plain English to the point, can significantly help individuals to process that information. If they, again, need someone sort of there to be able to unpick the questions, for example, allowing someone to be there to support, to clarify and explain things to them if needed, could also be an adjustment. If memory is an issue, so again, a lot of the time in formal interviews, it is relying on memory, which again doesn't necessarily show that individual's knowledge and skill set. So if that's the case, you know, can you permit them to take in their CV, or can they take some notes in with them, some bullet points that might help jog their memory. Other causes of stress, again, going kind of linking into the previous slide, which is panel size. So if you have an individual who is, you know, very stressed and very overwhelmed by a lot of things going on and a lot of questions, a lot of people sort of watching them, you know, could that panel size be reduced, for example? Could you offer video interviews if one-to-one is a little bit too much for that individual? However, please be aware of distractions. So whether that is in face-to-face interviews or if it's remote interviews, anything that you can do to minimise that distraction that could potentially sort of put that colleague or potential colleague off their kilter. Once you've recruited, so after the interviews, there's still a number of steps to employment that you and the employee need to go through. So this tends to be the onboarding process, and how can that onboarding process then be made more effective for both parties? There's likely to be a considerable amount of paperwork to complete. So once you've completed your interviews and you are happy with your candidate, you've selected them, the paperwork then commences in terms of the onboarding. However, neurodivergent employees might need help with the level of paperwork, including checklists, to help them keep on track of things, examples or templates to follow. You may need to offer direct support with the completion of any complex forms or any kind of checks that that employee might need to go through as part of the onboarding process. There can be some useful and practical things that can help with onboarding. These might include a tour of the premises to help with orientation and navigation. It can also be an opportunity to talk through the unwritten rules of a workplace, such as where you hang your coat, where you put your lunch, what's your desk, if it's allocated. It can also help for them to meet some of their new colleagues and put them at ease a little bit. Again, maybe offering that in smaller groups or even individually. Meeting a workplace buddy or mentor could also be something that can support them through the onboarding process. If they have one, Of course, that can be an adjustment in itself. You also may have been told some information about them and the condition or challenges prior to the onboarding process, for example, in an interview. But in order to support them for day one, you do need to discuss and agree any kind of workplace adjustments that may be needed for that individual to resolve their issues and their barriers to the workplace. It also helps them to display their skills and their knowledge, and allows them to then flourish and grow within their role. We've talked about the type of adjustments that may be needed sort of in the recruitment process, so the interviews and the job descriptions, the onboarding. We also do have some other webinars that talk about that as well. However, it's also worth considering if the individual needs to make an application to access to work. This is more so with the funding of adjustments. So the adjustments we've discussed today are more what we call a soft adjustment, which is things that we can do as businesses that can support individuals. However, you may have more over and above adjustments that are considered as hard adjustments that may require funding behind them, and that's where access to work may come into play. So another part of the onboarding process could be to explore a workplace needs assessment. These assessments are completely impartial, and they're carried out in the workplace to identify solutions to challenges experienced by an employee in their job. Usually the challenges that they experience are due to their disability and arise due to sort of symptoms and characteristics that are synonymous with certain disabilities. We'll not go into this area too much because we've got some webinars planned to explore this in greater detail, but just to summarise, adjustments are discussed in order to overcome their barriers. They are holistic and barrier-led, so they don't necessarily need diagnosis to access workplace assessments. Again, I've mentioned just previously there, adjustments come in two different areas as we sort of classify them as hard adjustments and soft adjustments. Hard adjustments, things like software, equipment, one-to-one support, mentoring, etc. Soft adjustments can be, documents in alternative formats, regular check-ins with the line manager, flexible working locations or hours, things like that, which is something that a business can do. As I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail in work assessments at the moment, but that kind of summarised review is good to know at this stage. Now I will pass over to our host, Nicola here, and she will take over from what they've done at Ipswich.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So yeah, just want to spend a few minutes just sharing with you really the journey that we've been on these last few months around neurodiversity. So here at Ipswich Borough Council. So yeah, ready for the next slide. And I thought it was important just to talk about our policy and our strategy. So this isn't something that just comes out of thin air. It's very much embedded into everything we do. Our EDI policy is available on the external website. It shows that commitment to equality, diversion and inclusion. And a couple of the key statements that I pulled out of that are on the screen there. We will have an effective recruitment, employment and promotion practice in place, and ensure that everyone is valued and supported as an individual. And also we're committed to recognising, valuing and respecting diversity and difference. So that then leads us on to the corporate strategy. So recognising actually that the EDI is from the top down. So I'll just wait for that slide to come over. Thank you. So I've just pulled a couple of bits of information, mainly from one of our mission statement actually, and that's to have a diverse, skilled and empowered workforce, and to take transparent decisions which make a real difference to our workforce. So for example, how we recruit, and that's one of the areas that we've been focusing on the journey so far. So it's very much underpinned and driven from the top, from the corporate strategy. And then that leads us in to a bit more of the detail via the people strategy. Key EDI pieces from that strategy are how the council will be effective in eliminating discrimination, and also how it will promote equality, opportunity and diversity. And that's as an employer and as a service provider. So our EDI commitments stretch over the two. So it really is reflected in how we do our business and who we're doing business with as well. So far with the people strategy, we've done a lot of work across what I'd call broader HR EDI initiatives. So we've created a new EDI e-learning, and that's available and mandatory for all new employees to the council. It's part of the corporate induction. We've also created some new e-learning for existing employees, and we had that filmed locally as well to really help that land with individuals across the council. We are disability confident. We promote that on our recruitment site. We are setting up network groups, things like menopause champions, and we are also sort of raising awareness of different awareness days. And that's led us into a more defined focus on neurodiversity, which is where we linked in with Kath and Matt for their support. With such a massive topic, it was a bit tricky to think, where do we start with this? And both me and my manager were very passionate about the topic, and it would almost be easy to do too much at once. I attended a workshop locally by one of the local solicitors, which was really interesting, and really helped us to think where do we want to start, what do we want to do. So we thought about mapping it out really against the employee life cycle, recognising that neurodiversity will touch each part of that cycle, and then thinking, well, let's start at the beginning, attraction and recruitment. So that's kind of where we've started with our journey so far. We have had Kath consult and review our policies and practices and procedures. So a good independent review there to see what we could do differently. And that included looking at our external microsite as well, and just picking out areas where we could be more neuro-inclusive. So a plan was put together for that, and that's something we're working through at the moment. And then the other key part to start with was developing awareness and knowledge within our own team. So HR are obviously at the forefront of employees, at the recruitment process, onboarding, and all the way through that employee life cycle. So we really wanted to ensure our team were comfortable and understood what neurodiversity meant, how it helps as a business. So, sort of linking back to one of Kath's slides earlier on, making sure we're attracting that wider pool of talent, that we're reflective of the community we work in, obviously that being Ipswich, that we want to improve our brand and be recognised as an inclusive employer, and absolutely that well-being is at the forefront of the council's agenda as well. So we had a really good day with Kath, looking at quite starting at the beginning with what is neurodiversity, what was the current knowledge in the room, understanding those percentages, and actually where a high percentage of our workforce, we employ about 1,000 people. So easily we could have 100 people within the organisation who are neurodiverse. We also spent some time looking at those strengths and challenges, and really highlighting those strengths, which I think was really important. And we looked at like the practical elements of workplace adjustments for all the different neurodivergent types, which was really useful. So we did that middle of March, and our sort of third cog in the wheel currently is to then take that awareness across the whole council. So we are in the process of designing a webinar. Well, that bit's pretty much done by Kath. We're going to have a 1-hour webinar available for anybody to join, and that will be recorded so that we can host that and share that on our LMS. But we're also going to do a short, snappy version, sort of 15-20 minutes. A couple of reasons for that. One being so we can reach out to our frontline staff. So we have people that are working out in the community, you know, for the whole day, not able to join a webinar, but actually to view a 15-20 minute video at a team meeting would be an ideal opportunity for them to participate as well. So those webinars are set to start rolling out at the beginning of June, and they'll focus on understanding what neurodiversity is, the different neurodivergent conditions, the strengths and challenges, and some of the simple adjustments that can be made to support neurodivergent colleagues. And that's from a manager's point of view, but also from everybody's point of view, being aware of the people around them and how they can support. So that's sort of where we are on our journey currently, and it's an ongoing journey. Our initial conversation, we got quite excited, but recognised it's, you know, slow down, do things methodically, see what's landing before we get too excited. But we are really keen on setting up an employee network. We will be continuing the training. Likelihood is that will involve some specific training for managers around recruitment process, continue to review the wider policies and procedures, and that sort of further understanding of reasonable adjustments. And one of the key pieces is the action plan from the consultancy that Kath did. And interestingly, in the workshop we had with Kath, we looked at a couple of job descriptions, and I think we were all quite surprised at immediately how all of us could identify very easily how they could be made more neuro-inclusive. And that was around language, jargon. One of them was a bit lengthy, you know, it was a bit wordy, and you sort of thought, what are they talking about? It doesn't really mean anything. So there's certainly some work there to do, I think, in maybe looking at a template that we can create to help managers with those job descriptions. So that's kind of where we are, and a little bit about what we're doing next. And, you know, it's been really good to work with both Matt and Kath on this, and I'm really excited to start rolling out the webinars across Ipswich Borough Council.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola and Kath and Helen. I'm sure you'll agree, some really interesting discussions and great advice and guidance. Now, we do have a little bit of time left for Q&A. Apologies, I know there was an issue with the chat function, so I think a lot of people have been putting a lot of questions through into the Q&A session, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to answer them all, but we'll try our best. We'll fly through. So what I'm doing, instead of opening it up to every member of the panel, we'll just try to direct certain questions at certain people to try and answer as many of them as we can. So I'm afraid I can't see who's asked any of these questions. Lovely old Zoom, but let's start with. So if our company wants to make changes, where's the best place to start? Are there any quick and easy changes that will help? So I'm gonna pass that to Nicola to start with. Any just some simple thoughts that you think?
Yeah, and I think you probably saw that's where we were at. You know, where do we start? Where do we start? And that's why we went for, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with that recruitment process, but also almost parallel that with starting to raise some awareness across the organisation. And then you can build on both of those. So that's worked for us. And I think it just gives you that good starting point. So hopefully that's helped.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. It's quite an important topic, this. So let's just open it up. Kath, do you want anything to add?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, it's quite easy for me to kind of talk about this because we had that very discussion with Ipswich Borough Council at the start. And I think one of the key things we identified was that until you can train everybody, who are the people who get asked the most questions about supporting the recruitment process or supporting individuals in employment? And it's the HR team. So actually, if you only want to if you only have a certain budget or a certain timescale in mind, the people who need the training first are the HR and recruitment team, because quite often managers are coming to them with questions. So until you can train all your managers and raise the awareness, they're the key people who are going to be the experts in the room, if you like.
Great, thanks. And Helen, anything else to add before we move on?
I'd probably second what Nicola and Kath have said. Yeah, start right at the beginning, unpick what you've already got as well. I think a lot of people sort of assume that they've got nothing, and that everything's incorrect when they start sort of exploring what can they do, but actually it might just be tweaking things as well. So trying to sort of, yeah, look at what you've already got as well as starting afresh.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question, there's been quite a lot of people talking about the rather contentious issue of disclosure. I think we recognise, despite all the work that's been done and continues to be done, there's still a stigma attached to neurodiversity, and people, for all the wrong reasons, or rather for all the right reasons, but mainly through negative perceptions, are often afraid to disclose, especially to a new potential employer. So I suppose two questions really. Number one is, what can an organisation do to try and improve that disclosure rate, especially for new potential applicants? Let's start with that question. So let's go, Helen, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, I often advise to come away from naming things. So look at the barriers. So rather than, having to put that pressure on a company to look for sort of disclosure, or an individual to disclose, say, hey, I'm dyslexic, it's actually, what do you find challenging? So it takes that kind of pressure off that specific area of, I have dyslexia. It's actually, I find processing's a little bit challenging. Can you give me 20 more seconds? It's a bit easier to talk about that and to give solutions than to then look at diagnosis. I think someone had said about this lost my words now, ironic, behind the sort of stigma and things like that comes alongside the sort of conditions. So just come away from the conditions altogether, I would say.
So it's that concept of barrier-led versus condition-led, especially for people.
Yeah, and just say, this is my difficulty, and this, this is what would help me, and then you don't necessarily have to disclose something specific per se.
Really interesting. Nicola, your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I couldn't go off mute for some reason. Yeah, so I think for us, it's really encouraging that safety of being able to disclose, and that it is confidential, and that we are here as an organisation to support that individual. So it's really ensuring that people feel that they're safe to do that.
It's that concept of that psychological safety, isn't it? It's
becoming
more and more important. Fantastic. Kath, anything to add?
Just really just be more neuro inclusive anyway, and then it doesn't matter if people have told you or not, because you're just doing things better. So just change all your job adverts, simplify your recruitment processes. Then actually, it doesn't matter if people don't want to tell you or don't want to ask for it or don't have a diagnosis. It doesn't actually matter, because you're doing things the right way. And coincidentally, it's actually a better process for every single applicant if you do that.
And it's that concept. It's a really interesting concept. It's that concept of universal design, where actually, if you design processes for people who might find certain things difficult, guess what? Probably everybody will find them easier. Then you don't have to make exceptions. You don't have to sit down and have a meeting about a change you're going to do, because you just do things better first time round. So it's actually more efficient. Absolutely. No, I completely agree. A slightly different slant on things, but this really interesting question that's been asked. And I think something that organisations might be more wary of is, somebody asked a question around, sometimes making accommodations like these can be seen as giving neurodivergent people an advantage. what's the best way to explain that this is about levelling the playing field? Come to you first, Nicola, on this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting. And I think probably I'd mirror what Kath said there previously. Make those adjustments available for anybody. If we think about nervousness and anxiety about interviews, anybody's going to feel that. People don't have to be diagnosed as neurodiverse to not enjoy doing things like assessment days. So I think it's about just making these processes approachable for absolutely anybody.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that it's a really interesting thought, because I think people always gravitate to the concept of workplace adjustments, or what some people call reasonable adjustments, just being linked to someone with a disability or a health condition or a neurodiverse condition, when actually individuals that require a little bit of support, a single mother, anything like that, a single parent or a carer, will require in some cases adjustments as well, but they're not often thought of in the same way, are they?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Helen, anything to add?
Yeah, when things like this crop up, I often then skip to more of a physical disability, because I still think we're better than what we used to be. But when something is sort of a hidden disability, there's still a bit of a issue around there. But I always draw the attention to, there's loads of diagrams out there where you've got people who are trying to watch a football match over a wall, and you've got certain people who are tall enough to see over that, and then you've got people who need one box or two boxes. Or you've got the bicycles as well. So you've got someone who doesn't have lower limbs, for example, they need a hand-propelled bicycle, whereas someone who's too short, can't reach the pedals, they'll need a smaller. So I often link that to the physical stuff, and then instantly see people go, it's the same thing. Just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's any different.
Perfect. Thank you. And then one final question. So I'm going to limit you all to one answer for this one. So we talked about the great things that can be done. Nicola's told about the great work that Ipswich have started doing and are going to continue to do. In one answer, what's the benefit that you have seen or would expect to see from making these changes? And I'm going to come to you again first, Nicola. One thing.
Just everybody appreciating that we're all different, and that's good. That's great.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Kath?
So I would say the benefit is you potentially go up to 20% of your workforce, whether they've told you or not, that could be experiencing challenges. So why would you not want to help them? Why would you not want that talent to be able to flourish in your business? Because we know replacing and recruiting talent is not an easy process. So as you look after your own, and you potentially have got up to 20% of your workforce who are neurodivergent, whether they've told you or not.
Fantastic. I've seen you smiling and nodding your head there, Helen. I hope you've got one more thing to add before we close down for the day.
I would probably just say it keeps staff and businesses happy, because they're able to work together more effectively. And when you've got people who can problem solve in different ways, you'll get so much more out of the individual, they'll get so much more for your business. And it's just an all-round much more positive environment to be in.
Wonderful. And what a lovely place to finish. So we have run out of time. I'm very sorry. I appreciate there was a huge amount of questions. We'll do our best to answer those separately and come back out to you with those. But in the interim, thank you all so much for attending, and a huge thank you to Kath, Nicola and Helen for taking the time out and helping us on this journey today. We will obviously be looking at future webinars. This is part of a three-part series, should I say, on the employee life cycle for neurodiversity. We'll be coming out very soon with details of part 2 in the coming weeks and months, and hopefully you can all join us then. In the interim, as we said, the recording for today will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next day or so, and we'll give you a link so you can access them, and feel free to share the good word amongst friends and colleagues and anyone else you think might be interested. But in the interim, till we see you again, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.